Hello, hello, hello to all. Welcome to another installment of Dpend Explorations. I'm your host, a disembodied voice on the internet talking. That should actually be correct if I transition it to where you can't see my face in the video because, well, this show is about exploring these concepts without the distraction of a form in the face, but still putting it in the intro so that I can trick people into being interested in it. No, but all jokes aside, this concept is going to be a personal challenge because it is actually quite difficult to verbalize realizations about life, especially if they're more philosophical or spiritual in nature. Not to mention that it is simply difficult to speak extemporaneously on a topic, especially when your brain insists on constantly forgetting the specific term that you want to use in the moment, making you pause for awkwardly long periods of time. In any case, without taking up too much more time, this show is essentially a resurrection of the Dpend podcast that I used to do on Podomatic. And this is the second installment. If you missed the other one, it was on the topic of quiet joy. And I plan to put these into a playlist so that you can access all of them easily. That being said, it is in no way a prerequisite to this show, and, well, it wasn't particularly riveting anyway, so don't worry. Today's installment is going to be a bit of a meta exploration because I really want to delve into some of the peculiarities to this format, that is voice, verbal exploration of a topic. Many of the aspects of this will extend over to conversation with people, though there are a few unique aspects to doing this sort of open-ended lecture to an audience that is somewhat uncertain. Whereas when you're having a conversation with someone, you obviously know who they are. It's quite interesting because I found it, well, obviously easier to explore a certain topic when speaking to a close friend, because in that case, it's quite clear through the progression of the conversation what is the most pertinent thing, what is the next step, and there's always a building energy of the person's response, and there's a natural give and take to it. I think one of the biggest obstacles to people feeling confident with verbally exploring things that they may know quite well is that there's an aspect of surrender necessary for one to go to a more profound level with any given area. There's a natural rhythm to the communication of conceptual forms that is not entirely willful, but it is automatic. And especially if we are the type of individual psychologically identified as a high monitoring individual, it's easy to be caught up in a sort of preoccupation with how we are looking and sounding to ourselves and to others. It also depends what is our main intention in communicating with someone. Is it subjecting them to dominance? Is it to mollify them or humiliate them? Or is it from an intention of simply educating someone? Is it an intention of a power struggle? Is it from the angle of a give and a take, where we both teach and learn? There's a lot of those dynamics and those intentions that are held deep within also affect the nature of this type of communication, which has an uncertain audience, because anyone who wants to can come along and listen to this, and they can do it at any point in time, which is quite interesting. I've always thought that people should get in the habit of recording their own personal conversations, especially when it has to do with philosophical matters more, and try and get to the point to where you feel comfortable with sharing those, because really this idea of privacy that we like to function underneath is somewhat of an illusion, because to the universe as a whole, there is nothing that is quote-unquote hidden. And that is, of course, the origin of the saying that every hair on one's head is counted. So we see that obviously based on what quality of intention we have in any given communication, there will be a lesser or greater difficulty of conveying that information. We will be to different degrees tapped into that information, and we will be able to convey varying depths of that information. There's also going to be a discrepancy in the accuracy of the information, depending on what our reason is for wanting to explore it and communicate it. All of these factors just go into the subtle energetic factor of communication before you even get into the mental considerations, such as what's referred to intelligence quotient, and then the vocabulary that you have, and the different languages that you speak, the dialects that you're familiar with. And then you have that entire intellectual set for the other person, and then how those matrices interact, yours and theirs, to result in a scene in the play of life, right? A dialogue that can then be looked back on and said, this conversation was really enlightening, or it was disturbing, or perhaps it was relatively pedestrian and easily forgettable. But all of these areas that we're talking about are related to surrender, and essentially the degree to which we're able to be comfortable with not being in total control, yet being in that interesting balance where our awareness is quite broad and clear, and there's an easygoing give and take of the waves of information that pass through us. Some are perhaps the rehashing of programmings that we have instilled into ourself over time. Other times, when we are in that electrifying nexus of the moment, there are surprising revelations that burst forth. If there is a tendency to claim them for one's own, or attempt to exploit them for some sort of gain, they will be progressively harder to access. But if one commits to using the faculty of communication for an integrous purpose, and that is primarily sharing, connection, empathy, compassion, education, which means the drawing out of the great potentials of the human being, then that gift will become renewed and it will continuously deepen. Many people have a great fear of looking or sounding stupid. And this often comes from many times in which they had an embarrassing experience, typically when you were quite young, where you are perhaps being pointed and laughed at. especially when you're in the course of learning how social expectations even work. When you're a child, you don't really understand the associations people have with different actions, and you gradually acquire that, partially from having embarrassing experiences and then being shamed by a society that wishes to constrain actions to certain vectors that are considered acceptable. And that unconscious fear of becoming embarrassed is something of an obstacle that we face when we are wanting to potentize the implications of our communication. Its accuracy, its general energy. Who doesn't want to have a conversation with someone and come away with the impression that that person really benefited and you also benefited from the exchange of that connection? No one wants to hang up the phone feeling misunderstood and that there were wires crossed and that there was a loss of respect on the part of both parties involved. Everyone wants to have meaningful communication in which things about life become progressively more clear and confusions can be gradually worked through. I believe that is also part of the root of the social anxiety so many people experience. You're going into a situation in which you really don't know what will occur. There are many variables, especially when you're in a situation that there are a large number of people. And finding that balance where you're open to the experience and willing to be vulnerable and genuine, yet being guarded enough that you are able to feel safe and secure. And that is actually the beneficial function of inhibitions, which many people willfully lower on the weekend and at certain events through liquid or other means. And yes, hello, Google AI algorithm, listening to and dissecting all of the words that I am employing here. Please be sure to detect how family-friendly my content is. There is no swearing or cursing in it whatsoever. Completely wholesome, and we are simply exploring concepts about surrender. It's an important faculty that anyone of any age can acquire. Okay, well, I don't know about you guys, but I had fun. And I think that I learned something from this exploration today. I think we overcame a little bit of something, some resistance that was holding us back from jumping into that fullest, best life that we all crave to live, that we're really meant for, and that we will gradually achieve through the actualization of these potentials that we hold. Thank you ever so much for tuning in, and be sure to check out one of the other videos on this end screen if you should feel so inclined. Don't forget to like and subscribe. If that even does anything, I'm really not sure anymore how YouTube works. Recommend me, Google. Okay, I think that's it. Yeah, have an awesome day. Goodbye. Don't be afraid to jump in the deep end. I was supposed to put a little catchphrase there. Okay.